May 15th, 1917. Champlou, France. The mud squelches beneath Corporal Henri Moreau's boots as he approaches a hulking shape covered by canvas tarps. Around him, soldiers from the 501st Regiment of Assault Artillery gather in small clusters, cigarettes dangling from lips cracked by months in the trenches. The morning mist clings to the training ground like a burial shroud, and somewhere in the distance, artillery rumbles, a constant reminder that the Western Front is never truly silent. Attention! Captain Bossett's voice cuts through the murmur of conversation. The men straighten, though their faces remain skeptical. They've been pulled from the line for this, whatever this is. 2 weeks of rest they desperately needed, traded for another one of headquarters' experiments. Bossett nods to a lieutenant, who yanks the tarp away with theatrical flourish. Henri stares. Then he laughs. He's not alone. The sound ripples through the assembled men, nervous at first, then building into genuine amusement. Before them sits what appears to be a metal coffin on treads. The vehicle is barely taller than a man, its hull a patchwork of riveted steel plates that look like they might buckle under a strong wind. A stubby cannon protrudes from a rounded turret perched on top, like a child's toy. That, someone muttered behind Henri, that's supposed to save us? The Renault FT sits there, seeming to shrink under their collective gaze. Henri has seen the British tanks, lumbering rhomboid monsters that crawl over trenches and crush barbed wire beneath their tracks. He's heard stories of the Schneider CA-1, massive and powerful. This thing looks like someone welded scrap metal around a lawn mower. Gentlemen, Bossett begins, his jaw tight, I present your new weapon. More laughter. Henri catches the eye of his friend Jacques, who mimes tipping the little tank over with one hand. Captain Bossett's face darkens, but before he can speak, another figure emerges from behind the Renault FT. The man is slight, civilian clothes hanging loosely on his frame, spectacles catching the weak sunlight. He carries a leather portfolio under one arm and moves with the careful precision of someone more comfortable with blueprints than battlefields. Louis Renault, Bossett announces, gesturing to the newcomer, designer of this vehicle. Renault doesn't acknowledge the introduction. He's already at the tank, running his hand along its sloped armor with something approaching affection. When he finally turns to face the soldiers, his expression is utterly calm, as if he hasn't just heard 200 men laugh at his life's work. You think it's small, Renault says. His voice is quiet, forcing the men to lean in. You're right, it is small. Precisely 4.96 meters long, 1.74 meters wide. He pats the hull. 6 tons for 100 kilograms. The British Mark IV weighs 28 tons. Jacques whispers to Henri, so it's a toy. But tell me, Renault continues, circling the tank like a professor with an exhibit, how many of those British giants lie burning in no man's land because they couldn't turn fast enough? How many became coffins because a single shell penetrated their side armor while they crawled in a straight line? The laughter has died now. The men watch him warily. Renault climbs onto the tank's rear deck, surprisingly agile. This vehicle has something no other tank possesses. Look! He gestures to the turret, a fully rotating turret. 360 degrees of traverse. The commander sits here, the gunner here. He taps the armor, and they can engage targets in any direction without moving the entire vehicle. Henri frowns, considering this. In the trenches, angles matter. Fields of fire matter. He's watched German machine gun nests massacre entire companies because they held the right position. The driver sits alone in the hull, Renault explains, dropping back to the ground. The engine is in the rear. This isn't a British design where the crew roasts alongside the motor, breathing exhaust and fumes until they pass out. He pauses, meeting Henry's eyes directly. This tank was designed by someone who actually thought about the men who would die inside it. The silence stretches for a heartbeat. Then Captain Bossett clears his throat. Demonstration, he orders. A crew materializes. 3 men who've clearly been training with the machine. They move with practiced efficiency. The driver sliding to the forward hatch, disappearing into cramped hull. The commander and gunner sending to the turret, their boots clanging on metal rungs. The engine coughs, sputters, then roars to life with a sound like angry hornets trapped in a steel drum. The Renault FT lurches forward. Henri watches it navigate the training ground, and despite himself, he's impressed. The tank pivots on its own axis, spinning in place, something he's never seen the lumbering British tanks accomplish. The turret rotates independently, the 37mm Puto's gun tracking imaginary targets. It crosses a drainage ditch that would have trapped a heavier vehicle, climbs a modest embankment, reverses with surprising speed. 7 km/h maximum. Renault calls over the engine noise, but it can maintain that pace. It doesn't break down every 100 meters like the Schneiders. Jacques nudges Henri. Still looks like a coffin. Maybe, Henri mutters, but a coffin that can shoot back. June 1st, 1918. Forest of Retz. Henri's hands are slick with sweat inside his leather gloves as he crouches in the commander's position. The turret reeks of gun oil, cordite, and the body odor of 3 men crammed into a space designed for efficiency, not comfort, through the vision slit. He can see the German positions, a maze of trenches and concrete bunkers 400 meters distant. All tanks. Advance on my mark. The radio crackles. Captain Bossett's voice, transmitted from the command post a kilometer back. Henri has been inside the FT for 2 weeks now. After the demonstration at Champloo, volunteers were called for. He'd stepped forward before he could think better of it. Partly from curiosity, partly because something in Renault's quiet certainty had convinced him. The training had been brutal. Learning to coordinate with his driver, Prive Dubois, a former Paris taxi driver who handled the controls with surprising delicacy. Learning to work with his gunner, Sergeant Petit, a taciturn Alsatian who could strip the Puto's cannon blindfolded. Learning to breathe in the suffocating heat, to navigate by glimpses through narrow slits, to communicate over the engine's roar. Mark, Bossett's voice commands. Forward, Henri tells Dubois through the speaking tube. The FT shudders into motion. Around them, 30 more Renault tanks emerge from the tree line in a ragged formation. They're not alone. A battalion of infantry follows in their wake, using the tanks as mobile cover, just as the doctrine prescribes. The first German machine gun opens up when they're 200 meters out. Henri hears the bullets ping off the armor like hailstones on a tin roof, sharp, insistent, but ineffective. The 8mm rounds can't penetrate the 16mm frontal plates. He remembers watching men die to these same guns, bodies torn apart in seconds, and now he's rolling straight toward them, untouchable. Target bunker, 11 o'clock. Henri calls down to Petit. The turret rotates smoothly beneath him. Through his periscope, Henri watches a gun traverse left. The Germans are scrambling now. He can see their gray uniforms shifting in the firing ports. They're trying to angle their MG-08 to hit the tank's thinner side armor, but the FT is already turning. On target, Petit confirms. Fire. The 37mm cannon barks. The recoil rocks the entire turret, and for a moment Henri sees nothing but smoke. When it clears, the bunker's firing port is a ragged hole. The machine gun has gone silent. Driver, right 10 degrees. Gunner, trench at 1 o'clock. They work like a single organism now. Dubois pivots the tank with precision learned from navigating Parisian traffic. Petit loads another round with mechanical efficiency. Henri scans for threats, calling targets, adjusting their approach. The infantry behind them pour into the captured trenches, and Henri realizes something profound. They're not breaking through. They're flowing through. A German anti-tank rifle booms somewhere to the right. Henri sees the impact, a bright spark against tank number 7's hull. The FT rocks but keeps moving. The armor holds. Bunker destroyed, Petit reports. Reloading. Through the vision slit, Henri watches German soldiers retreating from their secondary positions. Not routing. The Germans are too disciplined for that, but withdrawing in good order, recognizing that the position is no longer tenable. The Renault FTs have done in 20 minutes what artillery preparation and infantry assaults failed to accomplish in 3 days of fighting. June 2nd, 1918. Field Headquarters, Forest of Retz. Henri stands at attention before a map table, his uniform still reeking of cordite and machine oil. General Pétain himself is present, though he says nothing, merely observing with those cold, calculating eyes. Captain Bossett is presenting the results. 31 tanks deployed. 28 reached their objectives. 3 mechanical failures, 0 combat losses. German positions overrun within 45 minutes. Infantry casualties, 62% below projected estimates. A Colonel Henri doesn't recognize leans forward. The rotating turret? Essential, Bossett replies. The tanks could suppress multiple positions without exposing their vulnerable sides. They could react to threats from any direction. The British tanks require the entire vehicle to turn, often getting stuck or presenting flat armor to anti-tank weapons. The FT's design eliminates this vulnerability. Pétain finally speaks, his voice measured and deliberate. Production numbers? An aide consults his notes. Renault's factories are now producing 150 units per month, sir. By war's end, we project over 3,000 vehicles. Henri catches sight of Louis Renault himself, standing in the corner of the tent, almost forgotten. The engineer's face shows no triumph, no vindication. Only the same quiet focus he displayed at Champloo. He's already sketching something in his portfolio, probably improvements, modifications, the next iteration. The Americans want to purchase them. Another officer adds. General Patton specifically requested. Grant the license, Pétain interrupts, and inform our allies that the rotating turret design is to be shared. This isn't about French pride. This is about winning the war. Henri thinks about the men who didn't laugh that day at Champloo, who died before they could see what this toy tank will become. He thinks about Jacques, who now commands his own FT, who admitted 3 days ago that he'd been wrong. He thinks about the German soldiers he watched retreat, and how many French lives were saved because those soldiers couldn't hold their positions against this small, mock machine. November 11th, 1918. Compiègne Forest. The guns fall silent at 11 a.m. Henri sits on the hull of his Renault FT, the same vehicle he's commanded for 5 months, through 12 engagements, across hundreds of kilometers of French soil, reclaimed from German occupation. The armor is scarred, pitted with bullet impacts and shrapnel gouges, painted with the names of battles. Retz, Soissons, Champagne, Meuse-Argonne. Around him, other tanks sit in neat rows. Over 3,000 Renault FTs have been built. The Americans produced their own version, the M1917. The Italians, the Soviets, the Poles. Everyone wants this design. Everyone who mocked it now copies it. Du Bois emerges from the driver's hatch, blinking in the afternoon light. It's really over? It's over, Henri confirms. Petit joins them, climbing onto the hull with a bottle of cognac. He's kept hidden for this moment. They don't speak much. What is there to say? They survived in a war that devoured millions, protected by 16 millimeters of riveted steel and an engineer's vision that no one believed in. Henri runs his hand along the turret's rim, feeling the wear patterns, the smoothness where countless rotations have polished the metal. Every tank built after this war will have this feature. A fully rotating turret, independent traverse, a commander who can see and shoot in all directions. The British will abandon their rhomboid designs. The Germans will study captured FTs and build their own panzers. The Americans will make it doctrine. Renault's little coffin didn't just change one battle. It changed the fundamental architecture of armored warfare forever. In the distance, soldiers are celebrating, but Henri remains on his tank, watching the smoke from 1,000 extinguished fires drift across the scarred landscape. He thinks about that morning at Champloo, the laughter, the mockery. He thinks about Louis Renault's calm response. This tank was designed by someone who actually thought about the men who would die inside it. They'd mocked it because it looked fragile, because it was small, because it didn't match their expectations of what power should look like. They'd been wrong about all of it.